walking through ancient Jerusalem. Welcome, traveler. Tonight we walk together through one of humanity's oldest and most sacred cities, a place where stone remembers stories, where every pathway has been worn smooth by millions of footsteps across thousands of years. This is Jerusalem. For the next few hours, we'll move slowly through narrow lanes and ancient gates, past walls that have witnessed empires rise and fall. We'll trace the footsteps of kings and pilgrims, prophets and common people, all who walk these same streets under these same stars. There's no rush here. Let the ambient sounds of the night city wash over you. Let the weight of history settle gently around your shoulders like a worn cloak. Each fact we share is a doorway into the past, but the silence between them is just as important. This is a journey for rest, for reflection, for letting your mind wander through time. If this experience brings you peace, if you find value in these ancient stones and stories, I invite you to subscribe and leave a like. It helps others find this quiet place too. Now, let the night receive us. Let's begin our walk. Approaching the ancient city. Fact 1. Origins. Jerusalem is one of the world's oldest cities, with roots going back over 5,000 years. 5,000 years. Try to hold that span of time in your mind. Imagine all the human lives that have unfolded here, one generation giving way to the next, century after century. This hill has cradled civilization since before the pyramids were ancient, since before empires learned to write their names in stone. When the first settlement appeared here, it was little more than a cluster of dwellings clinging to a ridge. But already something about this place called to people. Already they sensed that these stones held something sacred. And they were right. Fact 2. Ancient Egyptian texts. Ancient Egyptian texts from around 2000 BCE mention the city as Rusalimum or Urushalim, likely an early form of Jerusalem. Even in the ancient world, Jerusalem was already ancient. Egyptian scribes writing on papyrus 4,000 years ago recorded this name. They knew of this city. Perhaps they sent traders here, or ambassadors. Perhaps they heard stories from travelers who had climbed these hills. The name has changed shape over millennia, but the sound remains. Rusalimum, Urushalim, Yerushalayim, Jerusalem. The same place calling across time in different tongues, yet somehow always recognizable, always itself. Fact 3. City of Peace. The Hebrew name Yerushalayim may combine words meaning foundation and peace, hinting at City of Peace. City of Peace. The irony isn't lost on history. This place has known more conflict than almost any city on earth. Yet the name persists like a promise or a prayer. Foundation of Peace. As if those who named it understood something essential. That peace must be built, stone by stone, generation by generation. It requires a foundation. Perhaps the name was always meant to be aspirational, a reminder of what this place could be, what it should be, what countless hearts have hoped it might become. Fact 4. Symbol of hope. Many ancient texts describe Jerusalem not only as a city, but as a symbol of hope, covenant, and future restoration. Jerusalem has always been more than its walls and gates. In the minds of prophets and poets, exiles and dreamers, this city became something larger than geography. It became an idea, a symbol of everything people longed for: justice, peace, divine presence, homecoming. When ancient writers spoke of Jerusalem restored, they were speaking of the restoration of the world itself. Even now, in the cool night air, you can feel that symbolic weight. These stones carry more than their own history. They carry humanity's deepest hopes. Fact 5. 3 faiths. Jerusalem is sacred to 3 major faiths: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, each layering new meanings onto the same stones. Walk these streets and you'll hear prayers in Hebrew, Arabic, Armenian, Greek, and Latin. You'll see synagogues, churches, mosques, monasteries, sometimes separated by a single wall, sometimes sharing the same ancient foundation. 3 great faiths look to this city as holy ground. Each has wept here, worshipped here, built here, claimed here. The stones have absorbed it all. Jewish memory stretches back to David and Solomon. Christian devotion centers on Jesus' final days. Islamic tradition connects this place to Muhammad's night journey to heaven. 3 different narratives, 3 different sacred geographies, all overlapping on the same hilltop under the same stars. Fact 6. Heaven and earth. For thousands of years, pilgrims have climbed these hills, believing that here, heaven and earth come closer together. There's something about this place. Pilgrims have always felt it, that sense of standing at a threshold, at a meeting point between the earthly and the eternal. Perhaps it's the way the light falls on these hills at dawn. Perhaps it's the accumulated weight of so many prayers offered here. Perhaps it's simply the human need to find a place where we can reach toward the divine. Whatever the reason, people have climbed these slopes for millennia, believing that here, if anywhere, their prayers might be heard. Here, if anywhere, the boundary grows thin. Fact 7. Hilltop skyline. In ancient times, travelers would see Jerusalem's hilltop skyline long before stepping through its gates. Imagine approaching on foot, as pilgrims did for thousands of years. You've been walking for days, maybe weeks. Your sandals are worn, your feet ache. You've climbed the last ridge, and suddenly, there, on the horizon, white limestone catching the sun, the city on the hill, the destination of your journey. Your heart lifts. The songs of ascent rise to your lips. You're almost there, almost home, or almost to the place you've dreamed of seeing. The skyline promises rest, promises encounter, promises something you can't quite name but desperately seek. Tonight, we walk through that promised city. We've arrived. Water, stone, and the first settlement. Fact 8. Gihon Spring. The earliest settlement grew up around the Gihon Spring on the eastern slope, where fresh water bubbled from the rock. In the desert lands, water is life itself. Jerusalem's first settlers knew this. They built their homes on the eastern slope, not for the view, not for strategic advantage, but for the spring. The Gihon Spring, where fresh water bubbled up from deep in the rock. A gift, a miracle in a parched land. Even now you can descend into ancient tunnels and hear water flowing just as it flowed when the first families made their homes here 5,000 years ago. The spring still gives, the water still remembers. Everything else grew from this: walls, temples, palaces, memories. But it all began with water rising from stone. Fact 9. Jebusites. Before Israelite rule, Jerusalem was a Canaanite city ruled by a people called the Jebusites. The Jebusites, a name that appears in ancient texts, then fades into the past like smoke. They were here first. They built the first fortifications on this ridge. They defended these slopes for generations. They knew these stones intimately, walked these paths, long before they had the names we know today. History is written by those who come after, and the Jebusites left few records of their own. But their walls remain, discovered by archaeologists digging through the layers. Their stones still stand, bearing witness to a people who loved this place enough to defend it. They are Jerusalem's forgotten foundation, yet they are not entirely forgotten. We speak their name tonight. Fact 10. Natural fortress. Jerusalem's steep slopes and high ridges made it a natural fortress in the ancient world. Stand on these heights, and you understand immediately why this location mattered. On three sides, the land falls away steeply. Deep valleys, the Kidron, the Hinnom, create natural moats. Any army trying to attack would have to climb, exposed, while defenders rained down stones and arrows from above. The geography itself is a wall. In the ancient world, when survival often depended on your ability to defend your home, this hilltop was precious. It was a place you could hold, a place you could keep safe, a place worth fighting for. The steep slopes that once protected ancient families still rise and fall around us in the darkness. Fact 11. City of David. The oldest inhabited ridge just south of today's old city walls is known as the City of David. Just beyond the current walls lies the original city, the first Jerusalem. The City of David occupies a narrow ridge that doesn't look like much at first glance, certainly nothing like the grand scale of later Jerusalem. But archaeologists working here have uncovered layer upon layer of ancient life. Houses, streets, fortifications, all clinging to this steep slope above the spring. This is where it all began. This modest ridge, this small settlement. From here, Jerusalem would grow to become one of history's most important cities. But it started small, started humble, started with a spring and a few families and steep slopes to keep them safe. Fact 12. Jebusite defenses. Archaeologists have uncovered massive fortifications in the City of David area that match descriptions of strong Jebusite defenses. The stones tell the truth that texts only hint at. When archaeologists dug into the City of David, they found walls. Massive walls, well built, exactly where ancient texts said they would be. The Jebusites' defenses. These weren't simple barriers. They were sophisticated fortifications designed by people who knew their craft, who understood engineering and strategy. You can stand before these uncovered stones and touch the same surfaces that Jebusite masons shaped. You can see the precision of their work, the skill of their hands. In these stones, the Jebusites become real again. Not just a name in an old text, but people, builders, defenders of their home. Section 3. David, kingship, and a chosen capital. Fact 13. David's conquest. According to the Bible, King David captured Jerusalem around 1000 BCE and made it the capital of a united Israel. Around 1000 BCE, everything changed. David, the shepherd boy who became king, stood before these Jebusite walls. The Bible tells us he captured the city through cunning, perhaps through the water shaft, perhaps through negotiation. The details blur into legend, but the outcome is clear. Jerusalem became David's city, his capital. In that moment, this small hilltop fortress became the center of a kingdom. From a Jebusite stronghold to the city of David, the transformation was complete. The destiny of this place was set on a new course, one that would echo through millennia. Fact 14. City of David. Name. In the Bible, Jerusalem is often called the City of David after King David made it his royal capital. The name stuck. 3,000 years later, we still call it that. The City of David. Not the city of the Jebusites who built it, not the city of the patriarchs who legend says visited it, but David's city. He claimed it not through ancient lineage, but through conquest and vision. He saw what this place could become, a capital that could unite tribes, a city that could be both political center and holy ground. Names have power. When we say City of David, we invoke memory. We call forth images of ancient kingship, of psalms and prophecy, of a moment when history pivoted on these hills. Fact 15. Strategic location. David chose Jerusalem partly because it sat between tribal territories, uniting the kingdom politically and spiritually. David was shrewd as well as faithful. Jerusalem sat on the boundary between tribal territories, not quite belonging to any one tribe, yet accessible to all. By making it his capital, David created neutral ground, a place that could belong to all Israel, not just to Judah or Benjamin or Ephraim, a place that could unify rather than divide. Politics and spirituality intertwined. The city became both throne and altar, both seat of government and house of God. David understood that to unite a people, you need a center they can all claim as their own. Jerusalem became the center. It remains so, even now. Fact 16. Central place. From David's time onward, Jerusalem became the central place for Israel's kings to rule and worship. After David, there was no going back. Every king of Judah who followed would rule from Jerusalem. Every crisis, every celebration, every coronation would happen here. The city became inseparable from the kingdom itself. To be king meant to dwell in Jerusalem. To worship Israel's God meant to face toward Jerusalem. The city's centrality became woven into identity. For ancient Israelites, Jerusalem wasn't just a place on a map. It was the center of their spiritual and political universe. Everything else was measured in relation to these hills. Fact 17. Royal necropolis. Many kings of Judah were crowned, reigned, and buried here, turning the city into a royal necropolis as well as a capital. Jerusalem holds the bones of kings. Generation after generation, rulers were crowned here, lived here, died here, and were laid to rest in tombs carved into the bedrock. The city accumulated royal memory like sediment. Each burial added another layer of sanctity. Another reason why this place mattered. Walking through Jerusalem at night, you walk above royal tombs. Beneath your feet lie the remains of those who once commanded armies, who judged disputes, who claimed to rule by divine right. They sleep in the darkness beneath the city they made great. Fact 18. Royal buildings. Ancient royal buildings likely stood on the elevated ridge now covered by later structures and streets. The palace is gone, but the ridge remains. David's palace, Solomon's palace, exactly where they stood, is now disputed by scholars, covered by millennia of building and rebuilding. But somewhere on this elevated ridge, kings once held court. Somewhere here, David danced before the ark. Somewhere here, Solomon received the Queen of Sheba. The specific stones have vanished, recycled into later walls, ground to dust by time. But the geography endures. The ridge still rises. If you know how to read the land, you can still sense where the palace must have stood, high, prominent, commanding the city below. Fact 19. Psalms. Psalms in the Bible celebrate Jerusalem as the joy of the whole earth and the city where God chose to dwell. Beautiful in elevation, the joy of the whole earth. The Psalms overflow with love for this city, not cold, political love, but passionate devotion. The poets saw Jerusalem as the place where heaven touched earth, where God's presence dwelt, where beauty and holiness met. These hymns were sung by pilgrims climbing the hills, by worshipers in the temple courts, by exiles dreaming of home. They transformed Jerusalem from stone and mortar into song, into longing, into hope itself. Tonight, walking in silence, we hear the echo of those ancient songs in the spaces between our footsteps. Fact 20. Tracing ancient routes. When you walk here at night, you trace routes once taken by royal processions, soldiers, and worshippers thousands of years ago. Your feet follow ancient paths. The stones beneath us have been worn smooth by countless footsteps, soldiers marching to war, pilgrims climbing to worship, merchants hauling goods, children running home. Every pathway through this city has been walked thousands, maybe millions of times. We are not the first to walk here on a quiet night. We are not the first to feel the cool air, to hear our footsteps echo, to wonder at the weight of history pressing close. We are simply the latest in an endless procession of souls drawn to these stones. In a way, we walk with them all, the ancient and the recent, the famous and the forgotten, all who have ever loved this city. Section 4. Solomon's Temple and Pilgrimage Life. Fact 21. Solomon's Temple. David's son Solomon built the first temple on a threshing floor he purchased from a Jebusite named Araunah. A threshing floor. A place where grain was separated from chaff. This was the spot Solomon chose for the temple, not because it was the highest point, not because armies had fought there, but because his father, David, had purchased it from Araunah, the Jebusite. The transaction. Money was exchanged for land, something humble, something honest, something that acknowledged the previous owners. On this threshing floor, this place of harvest and labor, Solomon would build the most sacred structure in ancient Israel, from a place of daily work to a place of daily worship. The transformation speaks to something essential, that the sacred and the ordinary can occupy the same ground. Fact 22. Temple Mount. The temple stood on a hill later known as the Temple Mount, a sacred platform visible across the city. Look up even in darkness, and you can sense the presence of the Temple Mount. It rises above the surrounding city, a vast platform, a sacred stage. From every corner of ancient Jerusalem, people could see it. The temple would have been visible for miles around, gleaming white limestone crowned with gold, catching the first light of dawn and the last light of sunset. Even now, with the temple gone for 2,000 years, the mount remains. The platform endures, and it is still sacred, still contested, still central to the religious imagination of millions. The hill remembers what once stood here. Fact 23. Spiritual heart. Solomon's temple became the spiritual heart of ancient Israel, where sacrifices, songs, and prayers rose day and night. The temple was never silent. Day and night smoke rose from the altar. Day and night priests performed rituals, Levites sang, and pilgrims prayed. The rhythm of worship was constant. Morning and evening offerings, Sabbath ceremonies, and festival celebrations. The temple breathed with the life of a people. It was more than a building. It was the beating heart of ancient Israel's religious life. To be cut off from the temple was to be cut off from the center of everything that gave life meaning and structure. To worship at the temple was to stand at the very center of the universe. Fact 24. 3 festivals. 3 times a year, pilgrims journeyed from all over the land to worship in Jerusalem during major festivals. 3 times a year, the roads to Jerusalem are filled with travelers. Passover in spring, Shavuot is in early summer, Sukkot in autumn. For these 3 festivals, families would leave their homes, their fields, their daily routines, and make the journey to Jerusalem. Sometimes it took days, sometimes weeks, but they came. The city would swell with pilgrims, tents would fill the valleys. The air would ring with greetings in different accents, different dialects, all united by a common destination and a common purpose. Jerusalem became, for these brief windows, what it was always meant to be, a gathering place, a home for all Israel. Fact 25. Songs of Ascent. Pilgrims ascended by foot, singing songs of ascent as they climbed toward the temple. I lift up my eyes to the hills. The Psalms of Ascent, 15 songs sung by pilgrims as they climbed the roads to Jerusalem. Each step brought them higher, closer to the city, closer to the temple, and with each step they sang. Imagine the sound of thousands of voices carrying the same song up the hillsides. Imagine the joy, the anticipation, the weariness of the journey transformed into music. The singing turned the climb into a ritual, the physical ascent into a spiritual one. Even now, walking uphill through Jerusalem's streets, you can almost hear those ancient songs echoing off the stone. Fact 26. Temple Courtyard. The temple courtyard held altars, basins, and storerooms that supported a complex system of daily offerings. The temple was a workplace, a busy place. Not just a quiet sanctuary, but a complex institution with its own infrastructure. There were altars for sacrifices, basins for ritual washing, and storerooms for grain, wine, and oil. There were priests on rotation, schedules to keep, supplies to manage, and animals to care for before they were offered. It was sacred, yes, but it was also practical. The spiritual life of a nation required logistics. Someone had to keep the fires burning, the water flowing, the rituals moving smoothly from dawn to dusk. The temple was both a transcendent mystery and a daily work. Fact 27. Retaining walls. A massive retaining system of walls and fills gradually expanded the temple platform over centuries. The Temple Mount we see today is largely human-made. Beneath the vast platform lie enormous retaining walls built and rebuilt over centuries, massive stones fitted together to hold back the earth, to create level ground where the hilltops sloped. Engineering on a scale that still impresses. This expansion happened gradually: David's time, Solomon's time, later kings, and finally Herod's massive renovation. Each generation added to what came before, literally building on the foundations their ancestors laid. The result is a platform that has endured for millennia, outlasting the buildings it was meant to support. Fact 28. Economic center. The temple not only anchored religious life, it also shaped Jerusalem's economy through offerings, markets, and trade. Where religion goes, the economy follows. The temple created a whole ecosystem of trade. Pilgrims needed animals for sacrifice. Merchants sold them. Priests needed grain, wine, and oil. Farmers supplied them. Travelers needed food and shelter. Innkeepers provided them. Money changers converted foreign coins. Craftsmen made ritual objects. Jerusalem's economy revolved around the temple like planets around the sun. The sacred and the commercial are intertwined. This wasn't corruption, it was simply reality. Worship requires material support. Faith has to eat, has to sleep, has to exist in the physical world. Fact 29. Prayer toward Jerusalem. For ancient Israelites, prayer facing Jerusalem and the temple became a powerful symbol of identity in times of exile. Even in exile, they faced Jerusalem. When Babylonian armies destroyed the city and carried the people away, they could take them from Jerusalem, but they couldn't take Jerusalem from them. In Babylon, by the rivers of a foreign land, exiles would turn toward Jerusalem to pray. They couldn't see it, couldn't reach it, but they could face it. This practice became a defining act of identity. To face Jerusalem was to remember who you were, where you came from, what you belonged to. It was hope embodied in the simple act of turning your body toward home. Fact 30. Nighttime silence. Today's nighttime silence around the Temple Mount covers layers of songs, shouts, and prayers that once filled the air. Listen to the silence. It's deceptive, this quiet. Because if you could peel back time, if you could hear through the centuries, this place would ring with sound. Levites chanting, priests calling, crowds responding, trumpets announcing the Sabbath, lambs bleating, fire roaring, thousands upon thousands of voices lifted in prayer, in celebration and mourning. All of that is gone now, buried under 2,000 years of silence. But on a night like this, in the stillness, you can almost hear it, a ghost echo, a memory of sound lingering in the stones. Section 5. Siege, destruction, and exile. Fact 31. Assyrian threat. In the 8th century BCE, Jerusalem faced the armies of Assyria, the superpower of its day. The Assyrians came like a storm from the north. They were the greatest military power of their age, disciplined, ruthless, unstoppable. City after city fell before them. Kingdom after kingdom was erased from the map. Their armies besieged Jerusalem in the time of King Hezekiah, surrounding the city, cutting off supplies, waiting for starvation and disease to do their work. Jerusalem stood on the brink. The Assyrian king sent messengers to mock the city's god, to promise destruction. The people watched from the walls as enemy campfires ringed the city like fallen stars. But Jerusalem survived. The Assyrians withdrew, and the memory of that deliverance became part of the city's identity. Jerusalem, the city that could not be taken. Fact 32. Broad Wall. Archaeologists uncovered a massive broad wall in the old city, likely built to defend Jerusalem from an Assyrian siege. The wall stands as testimony. In the Jewish quarter of the old city, you can still see it, the broad wall. Massive stones, 7 meters thick, built in desperate haste when the Assyrian threat loomed. Archaeologists found houses that were torn down to make room for this wall, their foundation still visible beneath it. Imagine the urgency, the fear. Homes demolished, families displaced, everyone working to strengthen the defenses before the enemy arrived. The wall was built from necessity, from the will to survive. And it did its job. Jerusalem held. That wall still stands, a silent witness to the terror of those days and the determination that answered it. Fact 33. Babylonian conquest. The Babylonians later captured Jerusalem in 586 BCE, burning the city and destroying Solomon's temple. But deliverance didn't last forever. A century and a half after the Assyrians withdrew, another empire rose, Babylon. And this time, Jerusalem's walls did not hold. In 586 BCE, after a long and brutal siege, the Babylonians breached the defenses. They poured into the city like water through a broken dam. What followed was destruction on a scale Jerusalem had never known. The temple, Solomon's temple, the heart of the nation, was burned. The royal palace was destroyed. The walls were torn down. The city that had stood for 1,000 years was reduced to rubble and ash. It was the end of an age, the catastrophe that would shape Jewish consciousness for millennia to come. Fact 34. Archaeological evidence. Layers of ash and broken stones in the archaeological record testify to that catastrophic destruction. The stones remember what texts record. Archaeologists digging in Jerusalem have found the destruction layer from 586 BCE. It's unmistakable. Ash, burned beams, collapsed walls, broken pottery, everything bears the mark of fire and violence. Houses crushed, storage jars shattered. Even arrowheads from the battle are still lodged in stones. The evidence is visceral, not just historical records written by survivors, but physical proof in the soil itself. You can stand in excavated areas and see the blackened stones touch the layer of ash. The catastrophe becomes real in a way that words alone could never convey. Fact 35. Exile. Many inhabitants were taken into exile in Babylon, beginning a painful chapter remembered in biblical laments. And then came the march. Survivors, priests, nobles, craftsmen, the educated, were chained and forced to walk to Babylon, hundreds of miles across the desert and the river, away from everything they knew. Their city lay in ruins behind them. Their temple was ash. Their king was captured and blinded. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, and we wept when we remembered Zion. The exile became the defining trauma of ancient Judaism. Everything that came after, the return, the rebuilding, the development of rabbinic Judaism, all of it grew from the soil of exile, from this moment of absolute loss. Fact 36. Prayer toward Jerusalem. Even far away, exiles prayed toward Jerusalem, longing to return and rebuild what had been lost. But they did not forget. In Babylon, in a foreign land, under a foreign sky, the exiles continued to pray. They turned toward Jerusalem, toward the ruins they could no longer see, toward the city that existed now more in memory than in reality. They told their children stories of what had been. They sang the old songs. They kept the memory alive. This wasn't just nostalgia. It was an act of resistance, a refusal to let the catastrophe have the final word. As long as they remembered, as long as they prayed toward home, Jerusalem lived, not in stones, those were broken, but in hearts. Section 6. Return, renewal, and the Second Temple. Fact 37. Persian decree. After decades, the Persian king Cyrus allowed Jewish exiles to return and restore the city and temple. And then, unexpectedly, came hope. The Persian Empire conquered Babylon, and King Cyrus issued a decree: the exiles could return. After decades of captivity, after a generation born in a foreign land, they could go home. They could rebuild the temple, they could restore Jerusalem. It must have seemed like a dream. Some went back immediately. Others stayed in Babylon, unsure if the promise would hold. But those who returned carried with them the memory of what had been and the determination to rebuild it. Cyrus appears in Jewish texts as an anointed deliverer, a foreign king used by God to restore his people. Sometimes salvation comes from unexpected places. Fact 38. Rebuilding. Under leaders like Ezra and Nehemiah, Jerusalem's walls and community were slowly rebuilt on a smaller scale. The rebuilding was not easy. Ezra and Nehemiah returned to find a city in ruins, inhabited by a remnant population struggling to survive. The walls were gaps and rubble. The temple site was bare. Enemies surrounded them, mocking their efforts, threatening to attack. But they persisted. Stone by stone, the walls rose again. The temple, smaller than Solomon's, less grand, but a temple nonetheless, was rebuilt. The community reorganized around the Torah. It was not a restoration of what had been. That was impossible. It was something new, built on the foundation of what was lost. Sometimes you can't rebuild what was. You can only build what will be. Fact 39. Second Temple Period. The Second Temple Period began in 516 BCE, reshaping the city around renewed worship and Torah observance. The Second Temple stood for nearly 600 years, from 516 BCE to 70 CE. This rebuilt temple anchored Jewish life. It was never as magnificent as Solomon's, at least not at first, but it served. Worship resumed, festivals were celebrated, pilgrims came. The rhythms of religious life that the exile had interrupted now picked up again, adapted, transformed. This period would see enormous changes: Persian rule, Greek conquest, Jewish independence, Roman occupation. Through it all, the temple stood, different from what had been before, yet carrying forward the same essential purpose: to be a place where heaven and earth met. Fact 40. Walking among empires. Walking by Jerusalem's walls today means passing the scars and stories of empires that rose and fell around this hill. Every empire thought it would last forever. Babylon, the great destroyer, fell to Persia. Persia fell to Greece. Greek kingdoms fell to Rome. Rome itself would crumble. But Jerusalem, battered, destroyed, rebuilt, transformed, Jerusalem endured. Walking these walls at night, you pass through layers of imperial ambition. Each empire left its mark. Each thought it had conquered this place permanently. Each was wrong. The empires are now stories, names in ancient texts, ruins in distant lands. But Jerusalem remains, not unchanged. Change is the only constant here, but continuously itself, continuously inhabited, continuously sacred. The hill outlasts the armies that surround it. Section 7. Greek influence and Jewish independence. Fact 41. Alexander's conquest. In 332 BCE, Alexander the Great's conquests brought Jerusalem under Hellenistic influence. Alexander came like lightning from the west. In just a few years, the young Macedonian king shattered the Persian Empire and claimed everything from Greece to India. Jerusalem, a small city in a vast empire, barely registered as a prize, but it was swept up nonetheless in the tide of Greek conquest. With Alexander came a new world: Greek language, Greek philosophy, Greek culture. Hellenism spread across the eastern Mediterranean like dawn spreading across water. Jerusalem found itself at the edge of this new cultural empire, no longer looking east toward Persia, but west toward the Mediterranean world. Everything was about to change again. Fact 42. Hellenistic culture. Greek language and culture gradually appeared in Jerusalem's streets, markets, and official life. Greek became the language of power, of trade, of sophistication. In Jerusalem's markets, merchants began keeping accounts in Greek. Officials conducted business in Greek. Young men from wealthy families studied Greek literature and philosophy. Gymnasiums were built where people exercised in the Greek manner. Even some Jewish texts began to be translated into Greek for communities scattered across the Hellenistic world. It wasn't all imposed from above. Some embraced it eagerly, seeing Greek culture as progressive, enlightening. Others resisted, seeing it as a threat to Jewish identity, to the old ways, to faithfulness. The tension between these views would eventually explode into violence. Fact 43. Maccabean Revolt. Tensions over foreign influence led to the Maccabean or Hasmonean Revolt in the 2nd century BCE. Eventually, resistance turned to rebellion when Greek rulers tried to suppress Jewish religious practices, forbidding circumcision, Sabbath observance, Torah study, and when they desecrated the temple itself, installing foreign altars and statues. A priest named Mattathias and his sons said, "Enough." The Maccabean revolt began with small guerrilla fighters in the hills, striking at Greek forces and collaborators. But it grew. Led by Judah Maccabee and his brothers, the rebels won unlikely victories. Against all odds, they reclaimed Jerusalem. They cleansed and rededicated the temple, an event still celebrated as Hanukkah. It was a moment of defiant faith when a small people refused to surrender their identity. Fact 44. Jewish independence. The Hasmoneans restored Jewish autonomy with Jerusalem again as the capital of an independent state. For the first time in centuries, Jerusalem was free. The Hasmonean dynasty established an independent Jewish state with Jerusalem as its capital. No foreign governor, no tribute to distant emperors. For roughly a century, the Jewish people ruled themselves, expanding their territory, enforcing religious law, and minting their own coins. It wasn't perfect. The Hasmonean rulers grew increasingly autocratic, increasingly Hellenized themselves despite their origins in an anti-Greek revolt. But for that brief window, Jerusalem was the capital of a Jewish kingdom again. The memory of sovereignty once tasted would never fully fade. Fact 45. Priestly and royal power. Hasmonean rulers combined priestly and royal roles, concentrating religious and political power in Jerusalem. The Hasmoneans claimed it all. They weren't descendants of David, so their claim to kingship was questionable. They were priests, descendants of Aaron, so they claimed the high priesthood. Eventually, they claimed both crowns, priest and king in one person, religious and political authority unified. This concentration of power in Jerusalem made the city more central than ever. All authority flowed from here. All decisions were made here. The temple and the throne, once separate, now merged. It was efficient, perhaps, but also dangerous. When Rome eventually came, toppling the Hasmoneans, it would topple both religious and political independence in a single blow. Fact 46. Fortifications. During this time, city fortifications were expanded and ritual purity laws deeply shaped daily routines. The Hasmoneans built walls and laws. Jerusalem's fortifications grew more sophisticated, new towers, stronger gates, expanded defensive perimeters. The city was preparing for the conflicts that would inevitably come. But the Hasmoneans also fortified Jewish identity through strict observance of purity laws, ritual washing before entering the temple, careful separation of clean and unclean, specific rules about food, Sabbath, and festivals. These laws created boundaries as real as stone walls, boundaries that defined who belonged, who was faithful, who was truly part of the community. Walls of stone and walls of law, both serving to protect what was sacred. Fact 47. Ritual baths. Ritual baths, or mikvaot, carved in stone around the city, show how purity was central to temple-centered life. The mikvaot are everywhere once you know to look for them. Archaeologists have uncovered hundreds of ritual baths carved into Jerusalem's bedrock from this period. Small pools with steps leading down into water, designed for ritual purification. Before approaching the temple, worshippers would immerse themselves, washing away impurity, preparing themselves to enter sacred space. These baths reveal how deeply religious observance was woven into daily life. Purity wasn't an abstract concept. It was a daily practice, a physical act of preparation and devotion. To live in Jerusalem during this time meant constantly moving between states of purity and impurity, clean and unclean, ready and not yet ready to approach the holy. Fact 48. Night silhouettes. Pilgrims approaching at night would have seen Hasmonean towers and walls silhouetted against the sky. Imagine approaching Jerusalem at dusk during the Hasmonean period. You've been traveling for days, climbing steadily toward the city. As the sun sets, you crest the final ridge, and there it is. Jerusalem on its hill, towers and walls dark against the dying light. Torches begin to flicker on the ramparts. Smoke rises from evening sacrifices in the temple. The sight would fill you with awe, with relief, with anticipation. The journey is almost over. The city of your prayers and dreams stands before you, real and solid and close. Tomorrow you'll enter through those gates. Tonight you camp in sight of them, watching the city settle into darkness. Fact 49. New growth. New neighborhoods and infrastructure grew as Jerusalem regained political and religious strength. The city expanded beyond its ancient boundaries. With independence came prosperity, and with prosperity came growth. New neighborhoods spread across the western hill, roads were paved, water systems expanded, markets flourished with goods from across the region. Jerusalem was no longer just surviving, it was thriving. You can still trace this expansion in the archaeological record. Hasmonean-era houses, streets, infrastructure. The city was reinventing itself, growing confident again after centuries of foreign rule. It was a moment of optimism, of belief in the future, of building for generations yet to come. Fact 50. Mediterranean attention. From this era onward, Jerusalem increasingly drew the attention of larger Mediterranean empires. But prosperity attracts predators. As Jerusalem grew stronger, wealthier, and more important, it drew the attention of the great Mediterranean powers. Egypt to the south, Syria to the north, and, most ominously, Rome to the west. Small kingdoms rarely stay independent when giants notice them. The Hasmonean dynasty would eventually tear itself apart in civil war, and the rivals would make the fatal mistake of inviting Rome to arbitrate. Rome came. Rome saw. Rome stayed. The brief century of Jewish independence was ending. A new and more powerful empire was about to claim Jerusalem for itself. Fact 71. The Siege of 70 CE. In 70 CE, the Romans besieged Jerusalem during a major Jewish revolt. The end came with terrible inevitability. The Jewish revolt against Rome, begun in 66 CE with hope and fury, ended in catastrophe. Roman legions surrounded Jerusalem in 70 CE, cutting off supplies, building siege works, waiting for hunger to do their work. Inside the city, factions fought each other even as the enemy pressed closer. Starvation spread. Desperation grew. The siege lasted months. Ancient historians describe horrors, people eating leather, eating worse, the dead piling up in the streets. And still the defenders held, believing God would deliver them as He had delivered their ancestors from Assyria. But no deliverance came. The walls, so strong, eventually fell. Fact 72. The fall. After bitter fighting, Roman legions breached the walls, burned the temple, and leveled much of the city. When the walls finally broke, Rome showed no mercy. The legions poured in, house to house fighting, slaughter in the streets, and then they came to the temple, the heart of everything, the symbol of Jewish faith and identity. They set it ablaze, the building that Herod had made magnificent, the building where prayers had risen day and night for 600 years, burned. The gold melted, the stones cracked from the heat. The flames are visible for miles. Everything that the temple represented, God's presence, Jewish identity, hope itself, seemed to burn with it. By the time the Romans finished, Jerusalem was rubble and ash, the end of an age. Fact 73. Archaeological evidence. Archaeologists have found collapsed stones and scorched layers near the Temple Mount from that destruction. The destruction is written in the earth. Near the Temple Mount, archaeologists have uncovered massive stones, part of the temple complex, thrown down by the Romans. They lie where they fell 2,000 years ago. Scorched layers mark the fire. Ash preserves the moment of catastrophe. Even broken pottery speaks of lives interrupted, homes destroyed, families scattered or killed. The evidence is overwhelming. Not legend, not exaggeration, but historical fact, written in stone and ash. Jerusalem in 70 CE experienced destruction on a scale that would reshape Jewish history forever. The stones bear witness to what texts record. Fact 74. Catastrophic loss. Thousands died or were taken captive, and Jerusalem's role as a Jewish temple city was violently interrupted. The numbers are hard to comprehend. Ancient sources speak of 1 million dead, though modern historians think the figure is inflated. But even accounting for exaggeration, the death toll was catastrophic. Thousands more were taken as slaves, marched to Rome to be displayed in Titus's triumph. The survivors were scattered. Jerusalem's role as the center of Jewish life, its temple, its priesthood, its sacrifices, all violently ended. The thread that had connected the Jewish people to this place for 1,000 years was brutally cut. Everything would have to be reimagined, rebuilt, and reconceived, but not here, not yet. Jerusalem was no longer theirs. Fact 75. Aelia Capitolina. Later, the Romans rebuilt Jerusalem as a new city called Aelia Capitolina, with Roman temples and streets. Rome rebuilt, but as something else entirely. Decades after the destruction, Emperor Hadrian refounded Jerusalem as Aelia Capitolina, a Roman city with Roman temples, Roman gods, Roman streets. He even changed the name, trying to erase Jewish memory from the very map. A temple to Jupiter rose where the Jewish temple had stood. Roman statues filled squares where prayers had once been offered. It was cultural erasure by architecture. Rome was saying, "This is our city now. Your history is over. We write the future. but memory is stubborn. Even under Roman stones, even with new names, Jerusalem remembered what it had been, and the Jewish people, scattered but unbroken, remembered too. Fact 76. Roman grid. A Roman grid of roads and arches reshaped the topography, but many ancient lines of the city still peek through. Rome imposed order in straight lines. Roman city planning was geometric. Straight streets, right angles, efficient intersections. They carved their grid across Jerusalem's hills, cutting through ancient neighborhoods, creating new pathways. Some of those Roman streets are still there, buried beneath later construction, but traceable in excavations. Yet the old city never entirely disappeared. Ancient roots persisted. Old walls peeked through new ones. The geography itself resisted complete transformation. You can't entirely erase 5,000 years of human habitation. The old Jerusalem survived under the new like a palimpsest, faint but readable if you know how to look. Fact 77. Jewish exclusion. For centuries, Jews were barred at times from living in the city, though many still came to mourn the temple's loss. Exile from their own city. After the Bar Kokhba revolt in 135 CE, Hadrian banned Jews from Jerusalem entirely, on pain of death. Later, the prohibition softened. Jews could enter once a year, on the 9th of Av, the anniversary of the temple's destruction, to mourn at the Western Wall. Imagine it. Once a year, permission to weep at the ruins of what you'd lost. The rest of the year forbidden from the city your ancestors built, the city of David and Solomon, the city that held your holiest ground. The cruelty of it was calculated. Rome knew how to wound a people's soul. But the Jewish people endured, and they returned eventually. Always they returned. Fact 78. Rabbinic Judaism. Rabbinic Judaism gradually shifted focus from sacrifices in Jerusalem to prayer and study wherever communities lived. When the temple fell, Judaism had to transform. Without sacrifices, without priests performing rituals, without a central sanctuary, how could Jewish life continue? The rabbis provided an answer. Torah, study, and prayer could replace sacrifice. The home could become a sanctuary. The community could exist anywhere, not just in Jerusalem. This transformation was creative, profound, and necessary. It allowed Judaism to survive diaspora, persecution, centuries of exile, but the longing for Jerusalem never disappeared. Every prayer ended, "Next year in Jerusalem." Every heart still turned toward the ruined temple. Adaptation didn't mean forgetting. Fact 79. Christian centrality. For Christians, Jerusalem remained central as the place of Jesus' death and resurrection, even under pagan Roman rule. Christians, too, kept Jerusalem central, even when it was called Aelia Capitolina, even when pagan temples stood where biblical events had occurred. Christian pilgrims still came, still sought the sacred sites, still prayed in hidden places. The geography of salvation couldn't be moved. What happened here happened here. No Roman renaming could change that. When Christianity eventually became the empire's official religion, the Christian claim to Jerusalem would be asserted in stone, basilicas rising over the sites of Jesus' passion. But even before that, even in adversity, Christians held Jerusalem in their hearts as the city where everything changed. Fact 80. Hidden ruins. The ruins of the Second Temple period still sleep beneath today's pavements, revealed in tunnels and excavations. The past is always just beneath your feet. Walk Jerusalem's streets and you're walking over history. Beneath modern pavement lie Ottoman streets. Beneath those, Crusader construction. Beneath that, Byzantine churches. Beneath those, Roman roads. And deeper still, Second Temple period houses, streets, shops. The Jerusalem that Jesus knew. Archaeologists tunnel through these layers, revealing them in carefully shored excavations. You can descend into these spaces and walk where people walked 2,000 years ago, touch walls they touched, stand in rooms where they stood. The ruins sleep beneath the living city, patient, waiting to tell their stories to whoever digs deep enough to listen. Section 11, Walls, Gates, and the Night City today. Fact 81, Ottoman walls. The visible Old City walls mostly date from the 16th century, built by the Ottoman Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent. The walls you see today are relatively young, only 500 years old. Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent ordered them built between 1535 and 1538, replacing earlier defenses that had fallen into ruin. Legend says he dreamed that lions would devour him if he didn't protect the city, whether driven by dreams or strategy. He built walls that have endured half a millennium. These Ottoman walls define the old city we know today. They set the boundaries, create the silhouette, frame the ancient quarters within. When people picture Jerusalem, they often picture these walls. Golden limestone, glowing in sunlight, crenellated ramparts, massive gates. Suleiman's vision became Jerusalem's face to the world. Fact 82. Following ancient lines. These walls roughly follow older lines, but also incorporate new towers, parapets, and stonework. Suleiman's builders followed ancient geography. They traced routes that walls had followed for millennia, along ridges, across valleys, following the natural defensible lines of the terrain. But they also adapted, building in their own Ottoman style, new towers, different gate designs, innovations in military architecture. The result is walls that feel ancient, but bear the marks of their actual age. Walk the ramparts, and you can see where Ottoman stonework meets earlier foundations, where Byzantine blocks were reused, where Crusader towers were incorporated. The walls are a timeline in themselves, each repair and renovation adding another chapter to Jerusalem's story. Fact 83. 4 quarters. Today's old city is traditionally divided into 4 quarters: Jewish, Christian, Muslim, and Armenian. 4 quarters, each with its own identity. The division isn't ancient, it developed gradually over Ottoman and later periods. But now it defines how people understand the old city. The Jewish quarter in the southeast, the Christian quarter in the northwest, the Muslim quarter in the northeast, the Armenian quarter in the southwest. Each has its own character, its own architecture, its own daily rhythms of prayer and commerce and life. The quarters overlap at their edges, bleed into one another, but each maintains a distinct identity. Languages spoken, food sold, religious observances marking time. 4 communities sharing one ancient city, divided and intertwined. Fact 84. Distinct rhythms. Each quarter has its own rhythm of prayers, bells, calls to worship, and quiet alleyways after dark. Listen to the quarters at different hours. Before dawn, the Muslim call to prayer echoes across rooftops. Morning brings church bells from a dozen different traditions: Greek Orthodox, Catholic, Armenian, Coptic, and Ethiopian. Evening prayers drift from synagogues. Throughout the day, each community marks time according to its own sacred calendar. After dark, the quarters are quiet differently. Some alleys are empty completely. Others maintain gentle activity. Shopkeepers closing up, families returning home, students hurrying to evening study. The sounds change. The pace slows. The city settles into the night, each quarter in its own way. Fact 85. Main gates. Several main gates pierce the walls, including Jaffa Gate, Damascus Gate, Zion Gate, and Lions Gate. Each gate has its own character, its own history. Jaffa Gate faces west toward the port city of Jaffa, the traditional entry for pilgrims arriving by sea. Damascus Gate faces north, ornate and grand, leading to the Muslim quarter. Zion Gate bears bullet scars from 1948's fighting. Lions Gate, adorned with carved lions, leads to the Via Dolorosa. Gates are liminal spaces, thresholds between inside and outside, between ancient and modern, between the city's separate realities. Pass through a gate, and you enter a different world. The old city holds its own atmosphere, its own sense of time, distinct from the newer Jerusalem beyond the walls. Fact 86. Golden Gate. One gate on the eastern wall, often called the Golden Gate, has been sealed for centuries, wrapped in layers of legend. The Golden Gate has been sealed since medieval times. It faces the Mount of Olives across the Kidron Valley, a symbolic threshold never crossed. Legends surround it, that the Messiah will enter through this gate, that it was sealed to prevent this, that it will open again at the end of days. Jewish, Christian, and Muslim traditions all attach significance to this blocked gateway. Now it's just a wall, stones filling an ancient opening. But the legends persist. The gate remains present in imagination, even though it no longer functions. Sometimes what's closed carries more meaning than what's open. Sometimes a threshold barred becomes a threshold sacred. Fact 87. Dung Gate. The Dung Gate near the south gives direct access to the Western Wall Plaza and the City of David area. The Dung Gate has the most humble name but crucial access. Named for the refuse that was once carried out through it, the Dung Gate now serves as the main entrance to the Western Wall Plaza, Judaism's holiest, accessible site. Thousands pass through daily, coming to pray, to place notes in the ancient stones, to stand where the temple once stood. The gate is small, unimpressive compared to Damascus or Jaffa, but it connects to something profound, the last standing remnant of Herod's Temple Mount, the wall that has absorbed millions of prayers, the stones that Jews were once forbidden to approach and now can touch freely. Fact 88. Walking the ramparts. Walking the ramparts lets visitors circle parts of the city above the roofs, lanterns, and courtyards below. Climb to the ramparts for a different perspective. From up here, you walk above the city, looking down into courtyards and across rooftops. You see laundry hanging, you see families gathered, you see the intimate geography of daily life unfolding below. The city reveals itself differently from above, more fragile, more human, less monumental. The rampart walk takes you along sections of Suleiman's walls, with views both inward to the old city and outward to modern Jerusalem beyond. You move between worlds with every glance, ancient and modern, sacred and ordinary, the eternal city and the living city, both real, both present. Fact 89. Underground spaces. Beneath the streets, ancient tunnels and cisterns carry the memory of older walls and forgotten stairways. Jerusalem has an underground twin. Beneath the streets lies a mirror city of tunnels, cisterns, ancient foundations, and forgotten passages. Some were carved for water storage, some were escape routes, some were simply street levels from earlier eras, buried as the city rebuilt and rose higher over centuries. You can explore some of these spaces: the Western Wall tunnels, the City of David excavations, Byzantine cisterns, and Crusader halls. Walking underground is like time travel. The air is cooler, sound echoes differently. You're literally surrounded by history, stone pressing close on all sides, silent and patient. Fact 90. Gate stories. Even at night, the stone gateways and arches hold stories of traders, pilgrims, and armies that once entered here. Every gate has witnessed countless arrivals and departures, traders carrying goods from Damascus, from Egypt, from distant lands, pilgrims coming to worship, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, each generation adding to the flow, armies arriving as conquerors, Babylonian, Greek, Roman, Crusader, Mamluk, Ottoman, British, refugees fleeing violence, exiles returning home. The gates have seen it all. Every human emotion has passed through these openings: joy, fear, hope, despair, relief, exhaustion, triumph, defeat. The stones absorb nothing and remember everything. Stand in a gateway at night and you stand where millions have stood before, each with their own story, their own reason for crossing this threshold. Section 12. Archaeology, Layers, and Living Memory. Fact 91. Modern archaeology. Modern archaeological work in Jerusalem intensified in the 19th and 20th centuries, using scientific methods to uncover the past. Archaeology transformed how we understand Jerusalem. Before the 19th century, knowledge of ancient Jerusalem came mainly from texts: the Bible, Josephus, ancient pilgrims' accounts. Then archaeologists began to dig systematically, using scientific methods, documenting finds, dating layers. The buried city began to emerge. Each excavation revealed more: walls, houses, pottery, coins, inscriptions. Each discovery added detail to the historical picture. Some confirmed what texts said, some surprised scholars, some complicated simple narratives, but all of it enriched understanding, turning Jerusalem from a collection of stories into a three-dimensional reality we could touch and measure. Fact 92. Iron Age discoveries. Excavations have revealed city walls from the 8th to 7th centuries BCE, along with arrowheads from the Babylonian attack. The Iron Age city emerges from the earth. Archaeologists have uncovered substantial remains of Jerusalem from the kingdom of Judah, the city of Hezekiah, of Josiah, of the late Israelite kings, massive walls, houses with bully bearing biblical names, storage jars, and arrowheads, three-pointed Babylonian arrowheads found in the destruction layer of 586 BCE. These aren't myths or legends. They're physical objects you can hold. The arrowheads flew in battle 26 centuries ago. They struck walls, embedded in doors, perhaps struck people. They're evidence of the catastrophe that texts describe. History made tangible in iron and stone. Fact 93. Silver scrolls. Two tiny silver scrolls found near Jerusalem preserve the oldest known copy of a biblical blessing dated to about 600 BCE. In 1979, archaeologists made an extraordinary discovery. In a burial cave near Jerusalem, they found two tiny silver scrolls, rolled up tight. When finally unrolled using painstaking techniques, they contained text, the priestly blessing from the book of Numbers. May the Lord bless you and keep you. These scrolls date to around 600 BCE, before the Babylonian destruction. They're the oldest surviving copy of any biblical text, older than the Dead Sea Scrolls, older than any other manuscript. And they were worn as amulets, suggesting that biblical texts were treasured, carried, and used in daily life, even in ancient times. Fact 94. Fragile preservation. These scrolls had to be unrolled and read using delicate modern technology because they were so fragile, the scrolls were impossibly delicate. Silver corroded by 26 centuries underground, rolled so tight they couldn't be opened without crumbling. It took years of careful work using special techniques to unroll them without destroying them. Millimeter by millimeter, the ancient text emerged. This is what archaeology requires, not just digging, but patience, precision, specialized knowledge. Every artifact is fragile. Every find could be destroyed by careless handling. The past speaks, but in whispers that require careful listening. Rush, and you destroy what you're trying to save. Fact 95. Multiple periods. Layers from Canaanite, Israelite, Persian, Greek, Roman, Byzantine, Islamic, Crusader, and Ottoman periods all lie within a small area. Jerusalem is archaeology's dream and nightmare. So many periods, so many layers, all compressed into a relatively small area. Dig anywhere in the old city and you'll likely hit multiple occupation levels. Canaanite under Israelite, under Persian, under Hellenistic, under Roman, under Byzantine, under early Islamic, under Crusader, under Mamluk, under Ottoman, under modern. Each layer represents centuries of human life. Each contains stories, objects, evidence of how people lived, but they're all mixed together, disturbed by later building, complicated by centuries of recycling stones. Sorting it out requires meticulous care and expertise. Jerusalem's richness makes it endlessly fascinating and extraordinarily complex. Fact 96. Vertical timeline. Each age reused, rebuilt, or buried the remains of the previous one, turning Jerusalem into a vertical timeline of human history. Jerusalem doesn't spread, it rises. When a building collapsed or was destroyed, people didn't usually clear the rubble down to bedrock. They leveled it off and built on top. When city walls needed strengthening, they added to existing walls. When new construction was needed, they quarried stones from older buildings. The result is a city that has risen layer by layer over millennia. The current street level in parts of the old city is many meters above the ancient ground surface. Walk down into excavations, and you're descending through time. Each meter down represents centuries. Jerusalem is its own archive, written vertically in stone and earth. Fact 97. Madaba Mosaic. Ancient maps like the Madaba Mosaic show a stylized Jerusalem with its walls, gates, and holy sites from a 6th century Christian view. The Madaba Mosaic offers a window into Byzantine Jerusalem. Created in the 6th century CE on a church floor in Jordan, this remarkable map shows Jerusalem as pilgrims saw it, stylized but recognizable. The city walls, the main streets, holy sites are marked with buildings. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre is prominently featured. The Cardo, the main north-south street, runs through the city. It's not accurate in a modern cartographic sense, but it reveals what mattered to 6th century Christians, which places were sacred, which routes were important, how the spiritual geography of the city was understood. Maps reflect not just physical reality, but priorities, beliefs, and ways of seeing the world. Fact 98. Walking with texts. Today's visitors often walk the city with ancient texts, the Bible, Quran, or pilgrim journals, guiding how they see each stone. People walk through Jerusalem with stories in their hands. A Bible open to gospel accounts. A Quran marking verses about the night journey. Medieval pilgrims' journals describing routes and prayers. These texts become lenses through which visitors see the physical city. They're looking for correspondences. Does this match what the text describes? Could this be where that event occurred? The city becomes a living text, and texts become maps of sacred geography, physical and spiritual, historical and theological, all intertwine. You're never just seeing stones, you're seeing stones weighted with meaning, inscribed with narratives, claimed by multiple traditions as evidence of their truths. Fact 99. Night walks. Night walks through Jerusalem's alleys carry the scent of stone, incense, and history lingering in the cool air. Jerusalem at night has its own atmosphere. The crowds thin, the shops close, the lanes are empty. What remains is stone and shadows, the scent of old incense from churches, jasmine from hidden courtyards, and underneath it all the smell of limestone, the smell of the city itself, worn smooth by millennia of footsteps. Walking at night, you hear your own footsteps echoing. You hear prayers drifting from windows. You hear cats in alleyways, wind whistling through archways. The city feels older at night, less crowded with the present, more open to the past. The stones seem to speak more clearly when fewer voices compete for attention. Fact 100. The city under stars. As the city rests under the stars, its past, biblical and beyond, quietly surrounds every footstep on these age-worn paths. And so we come to our journey's end. Jerusalem rests beneath the same stars that shone on Canaanite watchers, on David's guards, on pilgrims climbing toward Solomon's temple, on exiles weeping for their lost city, on Jesus walking to Gethsemane, on crusaders and scholars and seekers of every age. The stars don't change, but beneath them, everything changes and nothing changes. Jerusalem endures, transformed, destroyed, rebuilt, reimagined, contested, beloved, layer upon layer, story upon story, prayer upon prayer. The city continues, as it has for 5,000 years, holding more history than seems possible in such a small space. Tonight you've walked through that history. You've traced paths worn smooth by countless feet before yours. You've stood where empires stood, where prophets spoke, where pilgrims wept, where hope refused to die. The stones remember, the walls remember, and now for a moment, you remember with them. And so our walk comes to an end. We've traveled through 5,000 years in a few hours, from the first settlements around the Gihon Spring to the Ottoman walls that stand today. From Jebusite stronghold to David's capital, from Solomon's temple to its destruction and rebirth, from Roman siege to Byzantine churches, to the layered, living city that exists under tonight's stars. Jerusalem has been conquered, destroyed, rebuilt, and transformed. It has belonged to Canaanites, Israelites, Babylonians, Persians, Greeks, Romans, Byzantines, Muslims, Crusaders, Mamluks, Ottomans. Each left their mark. Each added a layer to the vertical timeline of this place. And yet somehow, Jerusalem remains itself, still sacred, still central, still calling to pilgrims and seekers, still whispering stories in the night. As you rest now, let these stories settle into your mind like dust, finding its place on ancient stone. Let the weight of history become not a burden, but a comfort. The knowledge that you are part of something vast and ongoing, that your footsteps tonight join with millions before you. If this journey has brought you peace, if you've found value in these ancient paths and quiet reflections, please consider subscribing to this channel and leaving a like. It helps others find this restful place, this slow walk through time. Thank you for walking with me through ancient Jerusalem. May your rest be deep and your dreams be peaceful. May the stones that have witnessed so much witness your peaceful sleep tonight. And may you carry something of Jerusalem's enduring spirit, its resilience, its hope, its refusal to be forgotten, into your own journey through time. Good night, traveler. Rest well.